Marc Francois thinks he can out-party me. He's in for a bit of a shock.
That is a drinking challenge right here on this podcast. Marc Francois is sitting literally 2 feet away from Nigel Farage.
I've no intention of going to bed at all.
Brexit has happened! Hooray! It's been 1,316 days since the UK voted to leave the European Union. MPs dithered, they dallied, some dug their heels in, but now, on the third Brexit deadline, we're out! Hooray! 47 years of membership. Done! I'm Christopher Hope, The Telegraph's chief political correspondent, coming to you, as ever, from the Red Lion pub, a stone's throw from the Houses of Parliament. And this evening, I'm joined by a very special group of Telegraph subscribers. Hooray! For Chopper's Brexit lock-in. They're quite excitable, listeners. They'll be helping me ask questions of 3 Brexit heroes, people instrumental in fighting for an independent Britain outside of the European Union. I'll be speaking to the man who wanted Big Ben to bong, possibly more than any other. That's Deputy Chairman of the European Research Group of Tory MPs, Marc Francois. Plus, I'll be asking Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage what it's like to have finally achieved his life's work. But first up, I'm sure you'll be very pleased to join me in welcoming the Telegraph star columnist, Allison Pearson. Allison Pearson, welcome to Chopper's Brexit lock-in. Have you got a drink? Is that gin?
I think it's water.
What do you want in that glass?
A G&T would be lovely.
G&T?
Yeah.
Brexit's happened. It's gone 11 o'clock. It's Friday night. No, it's about to happen.
Well, there's still, let's face it, there's still time for another Cooper-Letwin amendment, isn't there?
Yes. Now, you are uniquely, I think, amongst our readers, you get literally thousands of Telegraph subscribers emailing you their thoughts. And you demonstrated that frustration, didn't you, with Brexit in your columns?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I didn't think I knew our country, really, because I never thought we were a country where people would think it was okay to overturn a democratic vote. I thought that's what banana republics did, not the United Kingdom. So I was just really shocked. I'm still quite shocked. I still think about who are all these people who think they can put people down. I don't, but anyway, we won!
Did you ever think Brexit wouldn't be delivered? Do you think there was going to be a sellout by the elite, by the establishment?
Well, I think there were many junctures, weren't there? In fact, I was writing this piece for tomorrow's front page, and I was remembering that terrible moment in exactly a year before the general election, 12th of December 2018, when Conservative MPs took leave of their senses and didn't have a vote of no confidence. Do you remember Theresa May won the vote of no confidence? And she'd basically given the EU Hampshire by that point. You know, you're literally thinking, get rid of this woman. Everyone at home on the sofa was screaming at the TV, get rid of her because she's being absolutely hopeless. And then all these MPs. So there was this, I think we were watching, weren't we? We were watching Westminster with just absolute disgust and disbelief as they all sort of preened and, you know, strutted about and were terribly important. And you thought, it's not your gig, mate. You know, you're there to do what we've told you.
And they've learned that lesson, haven't they, over 3 years? The only answer to Brexit was to do it, wasn't it? I mean, I thought all the options of a second referendum, a new deal, not doing it, those were not the answers to that big vote in 2016.
Actually, we had a lot of luck in a way because thank you so much. The
gin's arrived now.
Thank you. Ooh, I'll be all right now. I'll stop being very fluent in a minute. The Remainers overplayed their hand because if they'd swallowed their pride and voted for one of Theresa's marvellous Brexit in name onlys, they'd have been home and dry. But because they were holding out for the second referendum, they overplayed their hand, and thank God that they did. But there were lots of moments where I thought, oh God, and it was making me feel I was going a bit mental, and I was really upset about it.
Do you miss not writing the words Oliver Letwin in your columns?
Oh yeah. I've met him. He's a really sweet man. Just massively.
He wears jumpers.
He does.
He wears jumpers and suits.
I know. It's just that he thought, what did he think he was doing? You know, it's
he was trying to help, wasn't he?
Apparently, he was trying to be helpful.
But who was he helping? I mean, a year ago, where was Brexit? The meaningful vote 1 had just been defeated by a record number. A second vote happened. And then, Alison, you may want to confess to Telegraph subscribers what you did about the third meaningful vote. Alison, you're amongst friends. Please
Well,
speak.
I don't know. No, I'm scared of them now because I got such absolute abuse for that. That one
What
lapse.
happened? What happened? Explain what happened.
I think I just thought, like a lot of people, that maybe this was going to be the only Brexit we were going to get, and I was so worried that we would get no Brexit. And in my defence, I think many people voted for that, including our current Prime Minister, Ian Duncan Smith. Plenty of people thought, didn't they? They made the same mistake, but Telegraph readers were much more staunch.
Well, the Telegraph itself didn't move, and the Spartans of whom Marc Francois is watching this.
Of course, then Nigel and the Brexit Party, that was the stroke of genius, was to bring the Brexit Party back for the European elections. And the fact then that so many people like me were no way were we going to vote for Theresa May's Conservatives by that point. I think she'd given away the Isle of Wight that week or something, So then millions of us, Labour and Conservatives, voted for the Brexit Party. And the Conservatives, if you remember this, were down to 8.9%.
During them.
In the elections, that was their vote share.
Right.
And that was an extinction level event. And
Yes.
at that point, even the Conservative MPs who cheered her to the rafters when they gave her a vote of confidence suddenly thought,
What's your lowest point and highest point for the past 3 years, Allison Pearson?
I think the sort of, I get them all confused, but the Cooper, Letwin, Ben extensions, that started to feel, oh God, how much more of this can we take?
And turning up at Parliament for nothing to happen, which is frustrating for journalists. No one should care. But
And also,
MPs,
let's make the point about the media. I had a dinner last night for the few plucky people in the media who had backed Brexit. And it was about 60, 65 of us. It's not very many. So we'd be turning on the telly, wouldn't we? And it's question time. And you literally, anybody who, vaguely agrees with you. And then they go to the studio audience. You think, what planet is this being recorded on? Because it's certainly not any part of the United Kingdom I can recognise.
That was a low,
That was a low point. The high point, of course, December the 12th, 10 o'clock, exit poll.
That resolved Brexit.
Hallelujah. Sorry, I'm not. Sorry.
Is that allowed, Theo? It's after 11 o'clock. No one's listening
It's after
anyway.
11 o'clock. Sorry. Just what joy, absolute joy.
Yeah.
And everyone, weren't we punching a reader wrote to me and said he jumped so high he'd broken his ceiling, which I thought. Then we knew, didn't we?
Yeah.
Then we knew that all their shenanigans, all their attempt to subvert what people wanted, that was it.
Yeah.
They were finished. And
He's lucky, Boris Johnson, isn't he? Because he had a clear solution to a big problem and a very weak opponent. How lucky is that?
At one point, we had the hilarious thing, didn't we, where we had Theresa May, who didn't really want to leave the European Union, who was leading a government that was supposed to be leading the European Union. You had Jeremy Corbyn, who's a lifelong Brexiteer, who couldn't actually then be a Brexiteer and had to keep going along with the fact that they were maybe remaining or not. So we had this, there's been so much farce, Chris, hasn't there?
Alison, thank you so much. Right, any questions from our subscribers?
Be kind.
Be kind.
That's John from Ealing.
Hello, John.
Should we get ahead of ourselves and think Brexit is done just because we're now leaving, or should we be watchful that actually the deal that's done doesn't truly reflect what we all voted for?
I'm optimistic. Boris has got a really big majority, and I think the people who've been elected, like these marvellous new people from the northeast, they've come in. They're not going to take any nonsense, I don't think. I think that it's not like the old Tories who were colluding. I think really now, and we're watching, the Telegraph's watching, isn't it? We'll see I want to see our fishermen getting their waters back. And
Fish is the first big test of this government, isn't it?
yeah, and apparently the cod we buy now is fish from our waters, and we buy it from the Dutch. So I think that's got to stop, hasn't it? I know we've had many false starts, but I do feel I feel we are pretty much home and dry.
Right, who's next? Any more questions?
Charlotte from South East London.
Hi, Charlotte.
Hello.
Charlotte.
Do you have, presumably you have Telegraph subscribers who are not Brexiteers, and how do you respond to them to keep them on board for the paper?
Great question.
Ooh, good question.
Alison Pearson, not for me, for you.
Tell them to read The Guardian.
Marc Francois there saying, read The Guardian.
Yes.
That's not
the ever diplomatic. I just sort of beg to we say we disagree respectfully is what I say. Obviously try to convince them, say that what my journey was to this point, and I have said on tomorrow's front page, there was no way our country would become a westerly province of the United States of Europe. That is not our history, that is not our destiny, and the British people would not stand for that. And that's become absolutely clear.
Is the point that after Brexit, it won't matter how what your vote was in 2016 because it's the new status is going to be like the weather? We're out, so it doesn't matter, and we'll go back to the old tribal Labour Tory differences.
Well, there won't be Remainers anymore, will there? I mean, there might be rejoiners, but there won't be Remainers. I have to say that both my children are disgusted with me as a Brexit person, so we banned Brexit as a discussion over Christmas lunch. They banned Brexit, and I banned veganism as a discussion.
Well, my wife Sarah calls herself a Brexit widow and calls it Brex. So I'll say no more than that. Right, well, please show your appreciation for Allison Pearson.
Thank you.
Now, my next guest has been the MP for Rayleigh and Wickford since 2001. He's held a number of ministerial and shadow ministerial positions since then, including Shadow Minister for Europe, would you believe it, for 3 years from 2007, and is now Deputy Chairman of the European Research Group. Marc Francois, welcome to Chopper's Brexit Podcast. Now, Marc, before we start and to, get you thinking about Brexit, we've got some of your best bits.
In this draft treaty, we would remain in the backstop and we could only leave if the EU allowed us. It is the so-called Hotel California dilemma. And moreover, Mr. Speaker, after many hours of debate and an extremely complex procedure, the House of Commons has decided sweet Felicity Arkwright.
This team, led by Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, will deliver Brexit. I came to the conclusion, reluctantly, we would never leave under Theresa May because her heart was never in it.
When the sun rises on the 1st of February, it will do so on a free country. Mr. Deputy Speaker, all I want for Christmas is not you. We will leave the European Union at 11 p.m. GMT on the 31st of January, and I hope, Mr. Speaker, in line with EDM2, the House authorities may allow Big Ben to chime at that time to mark that historic occasion. Because, by God, after all this, we're not doing it again.
Marc Francois, everyone! Marc, that's your career highlights in a nutshell the past 3 years. Do you feel emotional?
I think I do tonight, actually. I've wanted to leave since 2008. My epiphany, if you like, was the Lisbon Treaty. We spent 14 nights debating that. Well, I did, in great detail as we went through the specifics of the chapters of the treaty, and it became apparent at the end of that we couldn't change so much as a punctuation mark. Parliament had become...
And David Cameron said he'd ditch it and didn't. And that's the key moment, was it, in Tory politics on the EU, was that moment, wasn't it?
Well, I thought, we can't change any of this. We don't... This is bonkers. We don't run our own country. We're no longer in charge of our own destiny. We're accepting laws that have been written for us by other people who we cannot elect and cannot remove. And it's at that point that I realised that we had to leave. And it's incredible to think that within 8 years of that date, or just a bit over, we actually voted to leave the European Union.
It's quite a journey because, in 2010, there were, I think, a dozen members of Better Off Out. Mm-hmm. It was seen as a rather eccentric pursuit within the Tory party. And from that point, within a decade, it became mainstream national policy.
Well, in 2010, it was a love that dare not speak its name. But I think partly because Lisbon was so badly handled, because it was rammed through again, like Maastricht, without a referendum, that created the conditions in which UKIP grew. And, who is responsible for us leaving? Who is responsible for forcing Cameron to hold the referendum? I think the answer is it was both external pressure and internal pressure. It was the external pressure from UKIP, but it was also the internal pressure from Conservative Eurosceptics in Parliament. And that double whammy, if you like, finally persuaded David Cameron to hold a referendum to settle it once and for all. The people vote to leave. And then we had 3 years of utter nonsense when many MPs pulled every parliamentary trick in the book, the Grieve Amendment, the Letwin Amendment, and so on, the Benn Amendment, to stop us doing what the people had told us to do. And that's why the debate became so heated, because the public got so incredibly frustrated that the people they'd elected to represent them then materially refused to do exactly that.
I saw David Cameron on TV today outside his house, as he always is on big Brexit days, and he looked utterly miserable. He's off to the dentist. He was saying, "Oh, I know we're leaving. It's a bit of a drama." You know, he's miserable. Well, at what point will he start owning what he did? Because I wonder whether in 10 years' time he might be thanked by the wider world, might thank him for giving Britain this opportunity to trade outside the EU for the first time.
Well, I mean, he does say in his book, and I quipped at the conference, I wasn't in it, so I wasn't going to buy it. But actually, you know, I softened, and I have. But, you know, he does make the point in the book that he underestimated the strength of feeling on this issue in the Conservative Party. To be fair, he admits that he kind of got it wrong. He didn't judge the mood in his party.
He patronised it, probably, is what he means.
Well, he had a view. But anyway, so in the end, we got to the referendum and people voted. I mean, the best way I can try and explain the frustration, Chris, is like this. In 1997, when I stood for Parliament for the first time, I fought Ken Livingstone and Brent East, you know, and I got slaughtered. But during a hustings in Willesden Green Library, he said something I've never forgotten. He said, if you're a member of Parliament, a general election is an opportunity to commune with your 68,000 employers. Now, in Rayleigh and Wickford, I have approximately 79,000 employers, but the principle is exactly the same.
Employees, you mean?
No, employers. They employ me. I don't employ them, right? They employ me to represent them, and at a general election, they can choose not to renew my contract. The reason we got into such trouble in Parliament was many MPs forgot that. They got the relationship the wrong way round, and they thought that the people worked for them rather than them working for the people. Interestingly, certainly from the 2017 election onwards, we had the Greaves and the Seabury's and the Sandbacks of this world telling us ad nauseum.
Your friends in the party.
Well, there we are, you know, saying, you know, we have the support of our constituents for what we're doing. Well, then when they went back to them at the general election and said, renew my contract, without exception, their constituents said, no, thank you very much.
Well, they had left the party, so it was harder.
No, but they kept telling us, Chris, that what they were doing was backed up by their employers, and it was proven to be patently untrue.
You've taken more stick than most, haven't you, for your position on Brexit? You've ripped things up on live on TV. What was that? What did you rip up? What was that thing you ripped up?
I ripped up a letter from Tom Enders, who was then the chief executive of Airbus, because he had issued a letter the previous day basically threatening that if we didn't vote the way he wanted us to vote, he was going to withdraw 14,000 jobs from the United Kingdom. And I regarded that as a threat to tell members of Parliament how to vote, and I objected to it. That the actual story is that I saw the letter the day after it came out, and I was fuming. This was at about 11:15. And then the BBC rang up and said, oh, could you come down at midday and do a clip for BBC News 24? I said, is it a pre-rec? No, it's live. Oh, I said, looking at this letter. It's live, is it? Yes. OK, yeah, I'll take that. So I tropped down there, and there was a new presenter. He said, what's that? So it's just some notes. So, you know, we go on there, and then I said, I'm not going to be bullied. My father wasn't bullied. I'm not going to be bullied. And I ripped the thing up live on air, and it broke the internet.
How have you found the past 3 years? You've taken a lot of personal abuse on this, haven't you? I mean, and tonight is a vindication for your holding out to the deal that you felt was Brexit, which was the Boris Johnson deal.
Well, I think the toughest bit of all, and Allison referred to it earlier, was the meaningful votes, and particularly meaningful vote 3 when the ERG split.
Allison split with you.
Well, you know, some decided that this was the best we were going to get, and they voted for it. And some of us decided that if we did succumb, we'd end up in the customs union, and therefore we'd never really leave the EU at all. So we had to hold out. And it's quite difficult to fight your opponents in politics. It's even more difficult to fight your friends. So we had a genuine disagreement of view. We both agreed on the outcome. We all wanted to leave the European Union, but we had a big disagreement over tactics. And, you know, but it never got acrimonious within the group. You know, we managed to work as a team and still be friends afterwards. And in the end, you know, we got the desired result. And, you know, a little while ago, we became a free country.
That was your lowest point, and what was your highest point of the past 3 years?
What was the highest point? I think it's when we actually finally voted through the revised deal. Boris did play a blinder. He did get rid of the backstop.
After the election.
Yeah, he did change the political declaration to a free trade deal, not a Chequer-style high alignment. So when we won that on second reading, when I saw that go through, I really did, breathe out a sigh of relief. It's been a long journey. But, some things in life that are worth having are not always easy. But the real victors in this are not the politicians. I may have played my part, and Jacob and Steve and all the others, Steve Baker and all the others. But at the end of the day, it was the people that won. They took on their own establishment. The British establishment never wanted us to leave, thought the people had got it wrong in 2016, connived to prevent that decision. And in the end, at the general election, the people won.
Is it amazing that we're
around.
leaving at all, do you think? Because other countries would have just had a second vote and then overturned it, worked out a way of lift the threshold to a big level you couldn't possibly get to.
Look, there were people like Hilary Benn, and others campaigning for ages. They wanted a people's vote, right? Well, we had one. It's called a general election. And the people voted to leave. Now, I remember on the day of the first the first Lisbon vote in Ireland, my secretary was getting married in North Essex. And I pull up, picked up my researcher, we got out, we drive up this long gravel drive to this nice country house. I get out of the car, phone goes, Marc Mardell, political editor of the BBC. He says, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in North Essex. I'm about to see my secretary get married." I said, "Where are you?" He said, "I'm sitting outside a polling station in Dublin." I said, "Oh, right." He says, "Come on, what do you think's going to happen?" I said, "I think she's going to marry the guy."
That's an old one, isn't it? That's got to be an old one.
Yeah, but it always gets a laugh.
They haven't heard
it.
It
Always gets a laugh.
It's Brexit night, anything goes.
Yeah. So look, this has been an incredibly long journey, but I'm going to stay up tonight. I'm not going to go to bed. I'm going to watch the sunrise on a free country. It was a long road, but we got there in the end, and now we have to make the most of it. But there's one important point. We have to move on now. This has been a great passionate debate, because if you're not passionate about the destiny of your own country, what do you care about? But, from tomorrow, we have to leave those old labels of Remainer and Brexiteer behind, and we're just back to being Brits. And then we need to move on as one nation and make our way in the world. What Churchill called our island story starts a new chapter tomorrow morning, and it's incumbent on all of us to make the most of it.
I can't top that. Any questions for Marc Francois? Man in the middle there.
Peter from Wickford, actually, in Essex.
Peter.
You're a constituent of mine.
Correct, sir.
Did you vote for him? Did you vote for him?
We have met a long time ago.
Yeah,
Never
yes.
mind.
Did you vote for him?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, yes, it's Brexit night, but tomorrow we're still there in the transitional arrangements. How important and how concerned are you about, this transitional period and our so-called deal with the EU?
I think we'll do all right for three reasons. You're quite right. There is a transitional period. But we've left the institutions of the European Union. We've withdrawn our MEPs from the European Parliament. Sorry, Nigel. So we have left, but we've agreed voluntarily to continue to follow part of the EU's rule book for a year in order to allow business time to adjust. So we knew what we were doing. Why do I think we will get the deal that we want? Three reasons. One, because what's called the political declaration, which Boris got changed from a high alignment Chequers model to a comprehensive free trade deal. And the political declaration, if you like, lays down the tram lines within which the negotiations must proceed. And both sides have already agreed in principle on the outcome, which is a free trade agreement. So obviously we have to negotiate the details, but we've both agreed where we want to land. So that's the first bit of good news. The second thing is some people say, we can't do it in a year. The EU-Canadian deal, on which it will likely be modelled, took 7. True, but the flip side of that is all the heavy lifting's been done. So we don't start with a blank piece of paper. We take that agreement and then we modify it. And based on Boris's track record, everyone and his brother said you'll never get them to reopen the withdrawal agreement. And if you do, they'll never drop the backstop. Well, he did and they did. And he did that in 3 months. So be fair, he played a blinder. So that gives me confidence. And then thirdly, they now have a reason to come to the table. the one thing that's always terrified the EU, and particularly the Commission, is that we might become what you might call the Singapore of Europe, and that with a slightly different economic model, we would undercut them on world markets. They're desperate to prevent that. So in order to try and obviate that, they've got a very good reason to try and agree a deal. Do you follow me? So for that, I have thought about this quite carefully. For that combination of three reasons, I do believe we'll get a deal by the end of this year.
And you trust Boris on Brexit? On fish? The key test in the summer is going to be fish?
Well, we had a meeting of the ERG a few days ago to talk about our future. And we agreed unanimously that we would carry on, that we weren't going to fold our tents. We didn't win the war to lose the peace. And we do trust the Prime Minister, and we do believe that he will get the right deal, and we'll enthusiastically support it. But just in case, we're the insurance policy, aren't we? So as one of my colleagues put it, the submarine remains at sea. Thank you.
Right, don't go anywhere. In just a moment, I'll be back speaking to Mr. Brexit himself, a man who's been fighting this cause for a quarter of a century. It is, of course, Nigel Farage, right after this.
Hello there, Telegraph podcast listener. My name is Tom Gibbs and I'm the host of our Audio Football Club podcast. If your desire for top football chat isn't sated, then may I please recommend the Telegraph's very own podcast about that subject. Audio Football Club comes out every single Monday and it features some of the best and brightest football minds in the country, taking in all the biggest stories from the Premier League and around Europe. Search for Audio Football Club wherever you get your podcasts or follow the link in the description of this episode. Good things will happen to you if you do so.
My next guest needs no introduction. He is Mr. Brexit himself. I would argue that without his pressure on the Tory party, Brexit simply wouldn't have happened. Please welcome Nigel Farage! Nigel Farage, before we start asking you questions, here are your best bits.
The sun has risen on an independent United Kingdom. June the 23rd needs to become a national bank holiday, and we will call it Independence Day.
If we come out of Chequers still in an inconclusive mess, that's when the call will come between now and October to suspend the Article 50 process, perhaps for a year or 18 months.
That's the next thing.
If that comes, that is an outright betrayal that the British public will see, and I will be back next time. No more Mr. Nice Guy. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up a party. I'm going to call it the Brexit Party.
I'd like to see you and Boris get together, because you would really have some numbers, because you did fantastically in the last election.
The Brexit Party will not contest the 317 seats the Conservatives won at the last election.
I know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye, and we'll look forward in the future to working with you as sovereign.
If you disobey the rules, you get cut off. Could we please remove the flags?
Nigel Farage there. Well, Nigel, welcome to Chopper's Brexit Locker. You've got a pint of London Pride.
I do. Normally, I meet you in the mornings.
I know.
And it's only coffee, normally.
It's a dry podcast normally, but not tonight.
But it's a fun evening, folks, isn't it?
No. They've warmed up by Marc, Francois and Allison Pearson.
I'm sure.
So, Nigel Farage, is that it? You've done it now?
Well, do you know what?
Trotters up on the sunbed?
Do you know what? I mean, when I first decided in 92, I worked in the commodities business, so I spent all day changing things into different currencies. So I did a lot of currency trading in the 80s. And when we joined the exchange rate mechanism, I just thought this is going to be a complete disaster. And there were voices of opposition, but nobody really prepared to do anything about it. So I committed myself really in 92 that I was going to fight for this cause. I was going to fight from outside the establishment, not from within the establishment. And Chris, everybody thought I was absolutely stone bonkers. Now, a lot of people still do, of course, but here's the remarkable thing about tonight. Even 10 years ago, there was barely an MP in Westminster who would dare say we should leave. There was
about 10. To be exact.
Yeah, hardly anybody. There was no national newspaper at that moment who thought we should leave. Every big business, of course, thought we should stay. The trade unions thought we should stay. And it was considered to be, wanting to leave was a real minority sport. And here's the incredible thing. Right up until the last general election, at every opportunity, the establishment and the parties have tried to thwart this whole process. And the fact that it's happening at 11 o'clock tonight says, whatever my criticisms may be of British institutions, in the end, this is the most incredible victory of ordinary people against the establishment I think we've ever witnessed. And I think the big winner is democracy. And I actually believe 11 o'clock tonight is the greatest moment in our modern history. That's what I think.
Wow.
No, I really do. I really genuinely do. I can't think. I mean, in terms of our constitution, in terms of our position in the world, certainly for England, this is the most significant thing since Henry VIII took us out of the Church of Rome, and tonight we're leaving the Treaty of Rome. So there you are.
There's a poetry.
Yeah.
What was the moment over the past 10 years when you thought, I might actually do this? I'm often patronised by BBC Question Time presenters or wherever you go on, but I might actually be the guy who can force the Tories to take us out.
The moment I knew that this would go from being fringe politics to being a serious level of politics, although it was a slow burn, it was early in 2014, and there was a vote in the European Parliament to extend the EU to 10 new countries, 8 of them former communist countries, and then a further 2 joined. And it's pretty clear that many of them had not actually made the transition to being full Western democracies. And when we were told by Blair, who, don't I get a boo for Blair? I mean, come on. I mean, get some more drinks moving. I mean, Blair has said something tonight, which we'll come back to. Okay. Very significant. Blair has said something tonight that is very significant. But no, so we were told by the government, when we opened up the doors to Eastern Europe, 13,000 extra people a year would come. It was pretty obvious, isn't it? If your minimum wage is about 7 or 8 times higher than in some of those countries, and of course, hundreds of thousands of people came. And Chris, that was the moment when worrying about the impact of Europe on everyday lives wasn't just affecting small business people or fishermen, it was affecting everybody living in this country, because they suddenly found it was much harder to get a GP appointment, much harder to get their kid into the local primary school, that the traffic was worse. Yes, genuinely, because the population has gone up. And so I felt from that moment that if we could link immigration with EU membership, we could reach into the working class labour vote.
Have you worried about the criticism of being racist for doing that?
No, because I wasn't. If I had something to hide, if I had racist tendencies and I was trying to hide it, I think that might just about have come out by now. No, and I did my utmost with UKIP to not allow anyone ever to join it who'd formerly be in the BNP. We attracted plenty of support from the ethnic minorities, no question about that. No, talking about immigration, talking about numbers is not racist. And our population's increased by 6 million since 2001. And it may have been great for big businesses who've got cheap labour, but it actually has damaged our quality of life in this country. And so, no, that for me was the key. Once we could link those 2 issues, that was the key, because we were then reaching out to a much bigger audience. And here's the odd thing about what I've done over the years. Psychologically, the biggest effect I've had is on the Conservative Party. But actually, in elections like 2015, I had a much bigger effect on the Labour Party.
Yeah.
And we suffered.
Vote share of how many? 4 million?
Yeah, 4 million votes.
And 1 MP.
Yeah. I mean, there you are. But I mean, it's a tough old battle. Give me a PR election, I can win them all. First past the post, it's impossible. So no, it's once that link was made, and then of course the remarkable events since 2016, that the more the establishment tried to frustrate us, rather than giving in, we just became more determined, didn't we? We just became more determined. And I've watched, since I've been involved in this, I've watched the Danes being crushed in a second referendum. I've watched the French and Dutch just be completely ignored. I've watched the Irish vote no twice and been forced to vote again. And I think the great thing that this has shown is the British are too big and strong to bully. Isn't that great?
Well, yeah, and there's a British way of muddling through. I mean, the past 3 years has been required, don't you think? This uncertainty caused by Theresa May.
No.
Don't you think so?
No.
It's
No,
created.
no, no, no.
Well, let me give you an idea.
No.
It's created.
Stop being so nice to these people.
It's created a kind of uncertainty that meant that the clean Brexit that Boris has offered is the answer.
Well, I think the instructions were clear. I mean, I re-listened to David Cameron's 2030. Do you remember him, by the way? He was Prime Minister once.
He's on TV a bit.
Yeah, not much.
Not much.
Not much. His book's not selling too well either. But no, I mean, it was clear from the outset, wasn't it? It was an in-out referendum. We either remain or we leave completely. That was the prospectus that was put before us. There was never any doubt about it. You know, every single leading player on both the Leave and Remain side of the referendum said that if we voted to leave, we were leaving the single market, leaving the customs union. But here's the good news, Chris. Here's the really good news. Tony Blair, who has been, chief among those who wanted to overturn the referendum, chief among those who disrespected a genuine democratic vote, did not apply the principle of losers' consent, Blair has said, within the last 90 minutes, we are leaving, we must accept it, and let's work together to try and make a success of it. And that is great, great news. It means
feel vindicated?
Whether I feel vindicated is irrelevant. The fact is, the country is coming together. And I had caller after caller tonight on LBC saying, we will remain as Nigel, but you know what? It's happening. Let's make a success of it. The country's uniting. And that, I think, is actually pretty exciting, isn't it?
What do you want from this? Knighthood, a peerage, the grateful thanks of this room?
Do you know, I've only ever had one motive in all of this, and it was free beer, really. No. Do you know, the late, great Christopher Booker, who wrote for the Sunday Telegraph from 1961 up until a few weeks before his death last year. And it was the morning after I was elected in 1999, and the phone rang. And I must admit, I hadn't spent much time in bed. There was a bit of partying going on. And there still is. And Booker, and I knew Booker well. And Booker had supported me, all through the early days of UKIP, when it looked ridiculous. Christopher said, no, this political movement's got a future. He tried to help me. He was a mentor to me, really, and a great man. And Booker said to me that morning, he said, Nigel, I've written about politics in Private Eye, the Sunday Telegraph, for 40 years. He said, and there are two types of people in politics. There are those who want to be something and those who want to do something. And I resolved on that morning, for me, it wasn't about titles, it wasn't about rank, it wasn't about position, it was about doing things. And for me, it's been about changing things. So at 11 o'clock tonight, I will be thrilled, delighted. We have to keep a watching brief on what comes through 2020, of course we do. But I really do think we're passing the point of no return at 11 o'clock tonight, and I'm happy with that.
Will you be staying up all night like Marc Francois, our guest earlier?
Marc Francois thinks he can out-party me. He's in for a bit of a shock.
That is a drinking challenge right here on this podcast. Marc Francois is sitting literally 2 feet away from Nigel Farage.
I've no intention of going to bed at all, ever. No, but this really is. We're marking a moment in history. But as I say, I've said it already, I've said it again, we are celebrating a victory. Yeah. The people have beaten the establishment, and that's an amazing thing.
Do you worry about any uncertainty over the next few months and years will be blamed on you, won't it? You own that, Nigel. It's your fault that the GDP has gone down a bit before going up again.
I couldn't care less what people think. I've always done what I've done because I believe in it, and if people like it, that's terrific. If they don't, well, they go stuff themselves. I don't care. Do you know, the one thing about this, the Remain side thought they could scare the pants off us by talking about GDP. Oh my God, GDP could fall by 1%. I mean, who cares almost? This vote wasn't about economics. It wasn't about whether we thought we'd be better off or worse off. It's about being independent. It's about being self-governing. It's about being free. It's about choosing our own friends in the world. About being British, frankly. And the one thing about Brexit that nobody writes about or talks about or speaks about ever is this. There is going to be, I'm utterly confident, I'm seeing it already, there is going to be an uplift, an upsurge in self-confidence, in self-belief in this nation. And you can't measure that But I think that actually, in economic terms, Chris, will lead to great things too. I have never been more bullish about this country's future than I am right now today, and I really mean that.
Any questions for Nigel Farage, Mr. Brexit, the very front row, this man here?
Mike from Sevenoaks in Kent. Tonight has been a seismic moment for our country, our union. What does the government need to do to protect the union and ensure that Northern Ireland, Wales, and particularly Scotland, and all the noises that is coming out from Scotland with Nicola Sturgeon, that actual, that threat to the union, as some would see it, is actually dealt with and it's addressed, and the union is protected.
Big worry for Boris Johnson.
Parts of Wales are so Eurosceptic they make England look Europhile. I mean, this point's got lost. That Wales voted 53.7% to leave, and in the valleys, my goodness me, we're up in the 60s and higher. So Wales's position in the union is not even in question. All right, and Plaid are a relatively weak political party. Scotland fascinates me because Nicola Sturgeon doesn't agree with the result of the 2014 referendum, doesn't agree with the result of the 2016 referendum, and she's organised a protest tonight outside Holyrood, a pro-EU protest. It looked about 30 people there last time I could see. Look, it isn't going to happen because ultimately, once the status quo is we've left, we then are in the powerful position because then you have to reverse what is there as the status quo. And can you imagine the Scottish people being asked to rejoin a union, where they'd lose this, they'd lose that, they'd lose the other. They'd have to join the euro without much question. Also, I mean, their public finances are so bad, they'd probably have to slash health spending and education spending even to get in. I'm not worried about it at all. But what does Boris have to do, was your question. Very, very simple. Very, very simple. If Boris Johnson gets the Scots 200 fishing mile rights, like the Faroese, like the Icelandics, like the Norwegians, if Boris gets that, there will be thousands of jobs coming back to ports in Scotland, and the SNP's argument will be sunk beneath the waves.
Okay.
Northern Ireland is more complicated. It's been more complicated for 100 years. There is a big demographic change going on, but I still don't think that a united Ireland looks likely for a very, very long time.
Okay, the very back there.
Thank you very much. There's a European question here, or a German question even, if I may.
Where are you from, please?
I work for Die Welt, German paper. I was a Brussels correspondent. That's why I know Nigel for a very long time. Right. You've done Britain now. The job is done. So what is next? I want to know, you have plans for Europe, I think. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about it.
I mean, look, I went into the European Parliament in 1999. I believe the UK was a square peg in a round hole. We didn't fit for a whole host of reasons. We shouldn't be in. But if the rest of Europe wanted it, they should jolly well have it. All of that changed in 2005 when I saw the Constitutional Convention produce that document, the Constitution. I saw the French reject it. I saw the Dutch reject it. I thought, wow, just maybe Europe will start to realise that centralisation is not what the peoples want. What did they do? They rebranded it as the Lisbon Treaty. They didn't surrender a single power. They rammed it through. And even when the Irish voted no, they were forced to vote again. And from that moment, I have not just been a believer in the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. I want Europe to leave the European Union. I think it's a bad project. I think it's not just undemocratic, it's anti-democratic. And whatever I can do to bring that false empire down, I will do. And I'm already getting invitations to go and speak in capital cities all across Europe. I think us making a success of Brexit is the end of this European empire. And if we can get to a place where we have a Europe of genuine friendship, free trade, cooperation, reciprocity, I actually would be very happy to be part of it and to work in it, because I think it's actually what all of us across the European continent want. They have hijacked the word Europe. A European cooperation doesn't need flags, doesn't need anthems, doesn't need presidents, doesn't need police forces, doesn't need armies. So yes, I'm determined to do all I can to bring about the end of the European Union. Only then will the Brexit project be complete.
What are your plans for this year, Nigel, before you finish?
My plans for this year?
Yep.
I've got to get through the night first, dear boy.
Now, before Nigel Farage and Marc Francois get into their drinking contest, Telegraph subscribers, you can see some of the guests I've spoken to this evening, Allison Pearson, Marc Francois, Nigel Farage, at a Brexit Heroes event we're holding in March. Keep an eye on your subscriber rewards page to get tickets for that. If you're not a subscriber already, go to telegraph.co.uk/chopper, where until Monday you can get 50% off a Telegraph subscription where you can get Allison Pearson half price. Imagine that thought. I really wouldn't want you to miss my colleague Harry de Ketville's piece on the story of Brexit from the inside. He's spoken to all the key people at the Telegraph and the Tory party and charted their tempestuous relationship with Euroscepticism. It's really worth a read, and I'll put the link of this in the show notes to this episode. Thanks to my producers, Andy McKenzie, Theo Ludis, and Elliot Lampitt. Huge thanks to you for listening. We got there, Brexit that is, from the day we launched this show, when the UK triggered Article 50 to the day itself. If you want to get in touch, do Twitter us at Brexit Broadcast or email us choppersbrexitpodcast@telegraph.co.uk. Stay subscribed to this feed and you'll be the first to hear what we've got planned next. But always buy your copy of the Daily Telegraph. Until next time, in a free country, cheerio!